Welcome back to Movies TV Mad. You can follow me on X at Movies TV Mad and on Instagram and on Threads at Movies TV Mad X. A very warm welcome to Tuesday's edition of the Movies TV Mad Daily. So yesterday, James Gunn's Superman, David Coronswet, surprised fans in a movie theatre and signed his autograph, spoke to fans, and very briefly gave a brief tease about what the Superman movie he's going to be in, directed by James Gunn, is going to be all about. And it was very, very brief, I will tell you that. And probably by now most of you know about this. But I really want to kind of clear away the fog, because people that I speak to are very confused about this movie. If it's going to be canon to the DCEU, what is it going to be about? Is it a direct adaptation of, All-Star Superman, Jeff Loeb's Superman for all seasons? Well, David actually said this, that it feels like the vibe of Jeff Loeb's Superman for all seasons, which actually is one of the graphic novels that Smallville took inspiration from. And Jeff Loeb, who is an iconic comic book writer, spent a lot of time as a producer and sometimes a writer of Smallville episodes. David also said that you would feel the vibe of All-Star Superman, but he said the film is its own story. So let's be clear that although these two graphic novels, it's taking inspiration from these two graphic novels, it's not based on these two graphic novels. What does that actually mean? Well, let's look at Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice, because that is a great comparison. Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice takes inspiration from The Dark Knight Returns, but it's not an adaptation of The Dark Knight Returns. It takes elements from that story in terms of Batman being an older, jaded Bruce Wayne. In terms of panels, Snyder actually takes direct panels from that movie, but it's not an adaptation of The Dark Knight Returns. And it's the same thing with James Gunn's Superman movie. He's going to take direct panels from both those graphic novels, that's what I think he's going to do, and take inspiration from those graphic novels, but they're not going to be adaptations of, said graphic novels. And that's the best way to explain it to you. And it's still going to be its own story. It's going to be its own thing. So you may feel some vibes from those graphic novels, but it's not actually going to be an adaptation of either of those graphic novels. Now, I can understand why so many of you are confused, because James Gunn has teased umpteen graphic novels of Superman. And in the early days, we were thinking, well, is he adapting All-Star Superman? Is he going to kill Superman off at the end of this movie? Because All-Star Superman dies at the end of that story. And I got a little bit concerned, and you guys were getting a little bit concerned, and, no one wants to see Superman die at the end of this movie and Supergirl take over his mantle. And James Gunn says that's not going to happen. So we have to take James's word for it. So it's great that David Coronswet surprised fans that he was doing signings, and he's a very amiable guy, very good actor. I am happy with his casting. Of course, James Gunn seems to be really doing the charm offensive with nerds and Superman fans and his own fans. And those people are very hyped for this movie. But this movie won't make $1 billion because a bunch of nerds go and see it. Because we're going to see anyway, I've said this before. It's the general audience that have to be convinced. And this is going to be, there's something else I want to discuss as well. There's a difference between, hype on the internet and butts on seats in the cinema. Now, there's this saying started by Grace Randolph that there's a difference between DC fans on the internet and DC fans in cinemas. I don't believe that's the real issue here. I believe DC fans and Marvel fans go and watch MCU movies and go and watch DC movies. They're not the problem. But there is a direct correlation with hype on the internet and butts on seats. And it's not just with comic book movies. You know, if we talk about a film, an independent film like Monkey Man, that got a lot of hype from film boxed people, from Movie X Twitter, and all of a sudden people think, well, it's going to be a hit because everyone's saying nice things about it on the internet. That's not how it works. Because there's a bit of confusion about hype on the internet. We don't know, you know, a lot of the people on the internet, if they're kind of aligned to studios and if these are just bot accounts. Half the time, we don't know. Of course, there's also a lot of shills on the internet, right? And, you know, again, we don't know if they're affiliated to studios. They create a lot of positive buzz. But what's clear here is the buzz on the internet doesn't correlate to success in the movie theatre. And sometimes it does, you know, when you see the buzz for June 2. It's clear the buzz on the internet was exactly the same as the buzz in the cinema. In terms of the new Empire movie, you know, Godzilla and Kong X, or whatever they're calling it, right? That had a lot of hype online. It had a great opening. It did drop really, really big, over 70%, but it's still a hit. It's still going to make the money that Legendary and WB want it to make. So that's fine. But a lot of times you get hype on the internet, but you don't see the hype in cinemas. You don't see the success in cinemas. And it's happening a lot. It happened with last year's The Flash movie. There was a lot of hype. People coming out of CinemaCon telling everyone how great the movie was. Now, either they just come out from seeing a movie, you know, loudspeakers, you know, popcorn, ice blast, you know, and people were just hyped coming out, or they were lying to you. A lot of people who get early reactions, who have access, lie to you about movies, streaming and television so they can keep their access. That's clear. Now, I repost a lot of early reactions, not because I support their reactions and people misunderstand me. I think, because not everything I repost is stuff that I agree with, because I want to create an environment with different opinions on my timeline as well, but also to show you how corrupt online buzz is. So David Coronswet, going to a movie theatre, getting people excited is great, right? And of course it's done to create hype, but it doesn't mean the film is any good, doesn't mean it's a bad movie, doesn't mean it's a good movie. And also it doesn't guarantee success. But it's good they're doing these things. And I think another reason he turned up was that a lot of people were complaining that he's not on the internet, he's not online, you know, where is he? Has he gone missing? People making jokes, you know, he's gone missing. But the thing is, he's busy making a movie and he's a very private lad. The people I respect in today's industry are the ones who keep their mouth shut, post a few things on Instagram, get on with their lives, get on with their jobs. You know, Zendaya and Tom Holland, very, very private. I think they both got Instagram accounts, but they keep their beeswax private. And I like that. They're the people I respect. The people who do interviews on Variety and THR and shit talk, you know, historical incidents on a movie set. Oh, this director shouted at me. Couldn't give a shit, love. Don't care. Don't care, mate. Don't care. Shut up. Right? If something illegal had on the set, go to the effing police or shut the F up, right? And this is the problem today. They're so busy trying to destroy the reputation of old Hollywood and trying to protect the reputation of new Hollywood, which is shit, right? There's not, you know, the excitement from entertainment has gone. Let's not get it twisted. It is dead, right? There's more excitement and entertainment in the autopsies of movies today, you know, picking out the DNA and where did it all go wrong? You know, why didn't this film work? There's more entertainment in that and then in the actual films that they're making today. So I hope that James Gunn knows what he's doing in context of his story. Yesterday I did a video discussing if it really is a good idea to make Lex Luthor the main villain. And I also explained it's not necessarily that Lex Luthor's a bad, bland, boring character. It's just that it takes away the opportunity of a Brainiac, of a Metallo. Where, these are the things that fans have been waiting for so many years. And by saying you're making Lex the main villain again, it means fans don't get what they've wanted for such a long time. And there's been so many problems in making a Superman movie that works for the general audience and nerds. In terms of the Snyderverse, for example, it has a cult audience, right? And it's not like Man of Steel didn't make any money. It's not like BVS didn't make any money, but didn't make the money the studio wanted, right? But there hasn't been that Superman movie that's worked for everyone, right? Whether it's been Superman 3, Superman 4 was a disaster. Now, Superman Returns and Man of Steel are two very, very interesting films because Man of Steel is a domino effect from the reaction of Superman Returns. Superman Returns, a lot of people have done YouTube videos and fans complained about Superman Returns for being boring. I don't think Superman Returns is boring. I think that's the last of Superman Returns' problems. Superman Returns tries to tell a good story with good themes. Now, Bryan Singer is very, very famous. Sorry if it offends you to mention his name, but I have to mention his name because we are going to talk about him sometimes because he made a DC movie and he was a very, very talented director. His X-Men movies are outstanding, especially his first two. Bryan Singer didn't like doing beat-em-up third acts, right? So his Superman Returns movie is about emotions and it tries to, and it is a love letter. So many times, so many people have. It is a love letter to Dick Donner's Superman 78, whether that was right to do that or wrong to do that. You can have that conversation till the cows come home. But Singer tried to make an emotional movie. And it was all about, in terms of, making Superman relevant again, And the movie asks the questions that people have asked for many, many years. Is Superman relevant? Lois Lane in the movie writes an article, why the world doesn't need Superman. And it's all about, we don't need someone to catch us when we fall. And in the end, the movie says, actually, we do. And it justifies its position. But people complained there wasn't enough action in this movie because Singer kind of went back to the Dick Donner way of doing things, where he's not actually fighting someone, but he's saving people from a calamitous situation because Lex Luthor is trying to recreate Krypton, right? And whether you think the premise is dumb because he wants his own land or not, or whatever it is, I don't think it's any more dumb than a soulless beat-em-up in a third act. Now, don't get me wrong, I like a good beat-em-up. That's what superhero comics have been about. But there's also comic books that don't have beat-em-ups near the end. There's graphic novels, it's all about the emotion. And it depends what you prefer. And even if you look at Singer's X-Men, there's not really, the third acts are not, there are beat-em-up scenarios in them, of course. But like in X-Men 2, it's about Jean Grey's huge sacrifice. And it's brilliantly done. It really is a Wrath of Khan movie in a way. And Singer's Superman Returns sequel was going to go beyond that. I know exactly what he was going to do in Superman Returns because I was privy to what he was going to do. There were certain things getting out. And it was, as I said in my last video, I think that my opinion on Singer's Superman Returns sequel is this. That he would have fixed any problems, perceived problems people had with the first movie and made a huge movie. Because I think he did understand, like, the idea of the comics. He wasn't a comic book fan, but look, he looked into X-Men when he was given the task of doing it, and he pulled it off in those first two movies. And personally, I like X-Men Days of Future Past, and I love X-Men Apocalypse. Not many people do, so I think Singer did a good job. I'm not discussing whether he's a good man or a bad man. That's for you to get upset. And by the way, if you're upset because I'm mentioning Bryan Singer in a positive light as a director, I'll give you this. Because I love taking people's agendas and actually twisting them upside down. So if you're so offended by Bryan Singer, you won't be watching his Wolverine in Deadpool and Wolverine this summer. He cast Hugh Jackman. It's Bryan Singer's Wolverine stroke Logan. So you're still going to watch it, are you? Of course you are. That's what I do. I turn your agendas and turn them upside down. So at the end of the day, Bryan Singer has made important CBMs, great CBMs, and we're talking about it because we're talking about James Gunn's Superman as well. And I do believe there's an element of Gunn's movie that will attempt to do what Superman Returns did as well, which is justify Superman's existence, challenge the idea, is someone too good to be true? Can you be too nice? Is there an issue with good men? And, things like trying to justify in a world, that's what he said, in a world where people are cynical about nice people, and is it good to be good? So there's an element of that. So we don't really know what that means and what the movie is going to be. There's no question. We don't know what this movie is going to be. Thus far, we know some of the characters that are going to be in it. We know that Lex is the main villain. I don't know if he's actually lying about that or being sarcastic. We will see. But I think there's an element of that. So yeah, what I was saying was that Man of Steel is the consequence of Superman Returns not having enough perceived action. So there was actually a no. A lot of people think there's a lot of action in Man of Steel. In fact, some people say that Man of Steel had too much destruction and too much action. But that was a studio no. That was their reaction from the criticism of Superman Returns, because they do listen. So instead of not enough action, some people deemed that Man of Steel had, too much action and too much destruction. So think about the irony of that, right? They complained about not enough action in Superman Returns. Then they complained about too much action and destruction in Man of Steel. Well, make your fucking minds up. And it goes to show you that you can't please some Superman fans. I mean, personally, as I say, I don't think Superman Returns is a boring movie. I think it's a very, very interesting movie. I think there were certain elements taken out of the movie that hurt the execution of its narrative. For example, if you read the novelization, it's Lex Luthor who gets an astronomer to lie to Superman that there could be some survivors on the remains of Krypton, to get him out there, to get him out of the way, so he's not there when he's up for parole. Right, and it's kind of referred to in the movie. Cutting that and not involving that is a problem. Right, things like that. I was watching, there's actually this mad moment, right? Again, apologise if talking about Singer upsets you, but I was watching his video journal for Superman Returns, and it was very interesting, right? Just an offbeat little episode from his video journal is he gets a phone call from Peter Jackson while he's doing one of the Lord of the Rings movies. And Peter can't keep his eyes open, he's tired. So because Bryan Singer is doing Superman Returns in Australia, and they were filming, was it New Zealand, Australia, wherever they were filming the Lord of the Rings film. So Bryan Singer leaves the Superman Returns set, meets up with Peter Jackson on his set, and he directs a few scenes of this Lord of the Rings film because Peter can get some sleep. Now, I don't know if it was a joke, but there didn't seem to be a punchline, and I was watching this, and I can't believe I've never seen it before. I've got the Blu-ray, I was watching it on my Blu-ray. It was a crazy moment. But anyway, going back to the matter at hand, and so there were a lot of things cut out from Superman Returns which could have made the film more understandable within its narrative. It was a long film, not a very long film. Some people say Superman Returns was too long. But look, the box office doesn't lie. Superman Returns didn't make the money the studio wanted. Man of Steel made more money than Superman Returns. Now, Superman Returns is quite a historic movie in terms it's one of the early films that was shot all digitally, which wasn't a thing at the time, by the way. They used one of, at the time, a new digital camera called the Phoenix camera as well. So Superman Returns spent a lot of money. A lot of money. Man of Steel, by the way, spent a lot of money. You spend a lot of money, you need to make a lot of money. But they also felt that a Superman movie should be bringing in some money. But Superman's a difficult character to get right. I think in 78, Superman was exactly what the world needed because of what was going on. It was a very cynical world then, as it is now. But, there's Watergate, Vietnam had just ended. People needed a ray of hope. And I've said it before on this channel, that George Lucas's Star Wars 78 and Donner's Superman 70... No, let me say that again. George Lucas's Star Wars 77, A New Hope, and Richard Donner's Superman 78 gave the world the hope it needed, and a little bit of a false perception of what people wished America was. And so that was important then. And so we live in a very different world. We don't live in the innocent world that I grew up with. The world I grew up with had a lot of bad shit going on, with a lot of bad attitudes. But in a lot of ways, it was also still a very naive world. Because of the internet, because of social media and Google and all of this, there's nothing we don't know about each other, right? You could probably Google me and find some embarrassing shit out, right? We can research anyone we want because everyone has a kind of online footprint. So I think it's a different world. To make Superman successful today, a Superman film successful today, is a lot more difficult than it is, than it was in 78, right? Because the world isn't so innocent. There's nothing we don't need. Is the world crying out for a Superman movie? This is the thing. I think the world is crying out for a great Superman movie that brings us all together, and there's no question about that. But we will see. But going back to David Coronswet, turning up at a movie theatre, was it CinemaCon or was it? I don't know where he turned up, and he just spoke briefly about Superman. But yeah, I think these things are going to happen more and more, and I do think we're getting very close to the costume reveal, which is going to be huge because everyone's going to have a fucking opinion about that. Now, going back to Superman Returns, even though I can defend the film, I can't really defend the costume. I was watching, the costume designer on my Blu-ray special features, and she was saying before she was going, people are probably going to complain the cape's too short, the S-shield's too small, and it's interesting, isn't it? It is interesting. They kind of did something that they knew wouldn't kind of make people happy. So I saw Bryan Singer at Comic-Con when they were promoting Superman Returns. Someone actually directly challenged him. Why did you change the costume? So he's trying to defend it while the costumes look different. The problem is with Hollywood, they don't like direct adaptations from the comics, right? Dark Phoenix is an interesting comic book story in terms of X-Men. They've tried to do it twice and failed. And I'll tell you why it's failed. Not necessarily because, not because the movies were great, but I don't think the movies, I don't think Last Stand is as bad as people say it is. Dark Phoenix, the movie, and, which Singer had nothing to do with by that time. I think by that time he was cancelled anyway. But Simon Kinberg directed it. But it's like when you think you can do a better job. When an office boy thinks they can do a better job than their office manager. It doesn't work out because you're not actually clued up on all the responsibilities a director has. But I also feel that Dark Phoenix isn't right for live action. It doesn't work. There's dark, but that story is far too dark, right? It takes a character that we like and it visibly destroys them. And there's no way back for them. So, in terms of film, it's not really what people want to see on film. So it may be a lot of X-Men fans' favourite story in the X-Men comic book history, but it doesn't work in live action. They've tried it twice, don't fucking try it again. But I think the problem is with Hollywood, they don't like to adapt directly from the comics. I can't remember the last time a comic book movie actually adapted faithfully right, or took a costume, for example, a Superman costume, and said, right, we like that design, we're taking that design faithfully and putting it on the screen. They don't do that. And I don't think James Gunn's going to do that. But, and it's interesting in terms of Superman costumes, let's look at them. Superman 78 is, I mean, is it faithful to any comic book? Not really. It does its own thing. It's a very basic costume that looks amazing on Christopher Reeve, because Christopher Reeve was so disarming. And he didn't, he wasn't da-da-da. He let the costume do the talking, right? They built him up enough. He wasn't overly built up, but he was fit, he was built up by David Prowse enough to look good in the costume. So that costume is okay, and it's a solid costume. And some people may not like it now and say it's dated. But it basically does the basics. There's a big S shield, there's a long cape, it works. So then you go to the Dean Cain Superman costume that I don't like. It just looks cheap. It just looks like a dress-up party costume. If you ask me, Smallville used the Superman Returns costume, which I've already said, I don't like, and I don't think there's many people, if any people, who like that costume. Now, some people don't like the Man of Steel costume, the Snyderverse Superman costume. I prefer, and I think it is different from Man of Steel, and I think there is differences from Man of Steel to BVS, if you ask me. I think it's a little bit darker at times in BVS. I could be wrong. I may be seeing things that are not there. But I do like the Man of Steel costume. I really do. Now, they did become a bit obsessed with darker colours. Superman Returns got a little bit into the darker red, right, and the darker blue. They have gone a little bit darker with the costume. Now, we did get, a brief glimpse of the cape. That's the reason they were saying the jokes about the dog, David Coronswet's dog replacing Rachel Brosnahan as Lois Lane, because they wanted to say, well, look, the cape's behind the dog. And it is. And it's interesting is that a lighter red, I'm not sure, it's certainly not a very, very dark red. But without seeing him with the cape and the costume, which I think is going to happen very, very soon, by the way, it'll be interesting when. Don't forget, I'm recording this on a Monday. So tomorrow we should, at some time, and don't forget I'm in Europe, so maybe tomorrow for me, maybe the next day for me, I'm not sure. But in the next day or so, we are getting the Joker teaser trailer. So I don't see any costume being revealed in the next week. So maybe by the end of this month. I think it may come this month. We'll see about that. But I am very, very excited about the Joker Folie à Deux, the Joker sequel from the 2019 movies teaser trailer. Because I think this is going to be a very, very special movie, as long as James Gunn and DC Studios haven't given any notes and haven't interfered with it. And I don't think Todd Phillips is the kind of guy you get away with giving notes to. And plus, this is the beauty of DC Elseworlds. If they genuinely want a DC Elseworlds, it's nothing to do with James Gunn's universe. It's not a problem. It's not a competing property. But I think Gunn will be concerned about this movie in his head, quietly, that if this movie is really successful, right, it's going to be a problem. I think for James Gunn's Superman, the best thing that happened, and I don't know if he had anything to do with it, was delaying the Batman 2. Because if the Batman 2 came out in the same year, made more money than Superman, it's embarrassing and it doesn't put him in a good light. And if you look at the average for the first Batman movie, 750 million, we were still feeling the lesser effects of the COVID pandemic, but people still went. Joker movie made over $1 billion, because I've told you before, anything live action with the Joker in is mainly successful. Let's look at it again. Batman 89, successful, great version of the Joker. The Dark Knight, a great version of the Joker. That's why that movie is mostly so successful, right? And even David Ayer's, Suicide Squad movie, which isn't David Ayer's Suicide Squad movie, has the Joker in it. It made money because people, were seeing a trailer with Harley and Joker in it, so they got excited. So, and the Joker movie, as I say, $1 billion, right? Over $1 billion. So anything, you look at the record of anything with the Joker in it, he's such a popular character. I think the Joker, in terms of film, is the biggest thing, you know, the biggest, thing that will drive audiences to see him. That people love the Joker. So I don't see a reality where this movie isn't successful. The Californian woke critics may not like the movie, like they didn't like the first movie, right? But they're not important, because there's another correlation, isn't there, as well? The critics hated the new Godzilla and King Kong movie, but you, the audience, said, fuck you, up yours. You went and saw it. It had a record-breaking opening weekend. It's going to do okay. It had a big drop-off, fair enough. But it's going to make money, right? It's made about 135 million. Is that domestic now, is it? I don't know. But yeah, I think it could break 300, 400 million globally. And that's fine for them, because if that's a Superman movie, that is a flop. But that film isn't, that's not a flop if that movie brings in that type of money. So there's two things going on right now, even just away from DC and comic books, that people don't listen to critics anymore, online critics or, verified critics. And the hype for a film, a TV show or a streaming show online doesn't mean it's going to be successful.